On today's episode, what was Ghost like in the early days? And what was it like to meet Cardinal Copia on crutches? All this and more on gonstFM, off air. Welcome, ghouls, ghoulettes, and guesties to gonstFM Off Air, the official podcast companion to 66.6 gonstFM, the radio station dedicated to the band Ghost and the wider Gonst community. I'm your host, Richie, aka Papa X, aka Papa Me Emeritus, as so lovingly named by all of you Gonstlings. Today, I'm sitting down with Anthony Daly, creator of the Facebook group Ghost Cosplay. Anthony is also a humongous Ghost fan dating all the way back to 2012 in the Infestissimon days. Anthony is somebody I consider to be a master cosplayer and just a really cool fucking guy. He's got stories from the road meeting Cardinal Copia, Papa 4, some of the band members, but I'm going to let him tell all these stories to you because honestly, they're pretty great. How's it going, bud? Thanks for sitting with me today.
Hey, I'm doing good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Like finally, like not in the interweb space. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everybody out there listening, it's a fun story about how Anthony and I came into contact with each other, as most of the guesties have, just finding each other on social media and finding stuff, obviously like outside of Ghost, which is the glue that kind of bonds us all really, but just finding out that you have stuff in common with, at the time, total strangers that become your friends. That's probably the coolest damn thing about this community. And whenever Anthony and I started talking, he had a ton of cool shit that I was just like, oh, this is great. And we were just kind of just chatting, and we were both like, this would be a really fun episode to do for a podcast, because I think a lot of people come into this band late, and not a lot of people really appreciate like the early days, you know, as much as I feel like they should. And those are some of my favorite things. And it's the stuff that I wish I were there for in real time. And you were actually there in real time for a lot of this stuff, dude.
Yeah, I came on board in late 2012, so it would have been like probably a couple like great timing just before the switch to Papa 2. I remember that was one of the first things. I might have like a few dates obviously fuzzy because it's been so long,
Sure.
but it was definitely right around like the beginning of the promotion for Secular Haze, because there was a local record store Facebook page that had posted about it. And I was like kind of intrigued, but I was playing in a band at the time, and the guitar player in that band had just seen them. You know, I was a big Kiss fan, so I liked theatrical rock. And so he was like, you know, you'll like this band. And so I checked it out, you know, and at that point, I think it was just Opus out. And I was like, wow, you know, that's like, you know, I also loved like Black Sabbath and, you know, all of that like 70s, 80s rock. So it was like immediately right off my alley. But I was so drawn to the mystique of like, you know, it felt like kind of like discovering Kiss in the 70s, you know, where like you didn't know who they were, what they looked like, right. You know, and, you know, I also liked, you know, that kind of satanic image because it kind of gave me that, you know, relief from all the Catholic guilt and all of that, you know, and so I was like, this is cool and this is dangerous and this is like new and it's cool. And I got heavily into it.
Yeah, that's kind of where my interest peaked as far as like, because I've told this story. Actually, I just told this a couple weeks ago on a couple different shows, but me getting into them was like just passively seeing them, you know? And I was like, that looks cool. I'll file that and check it out later. And, you know, ADHD went every time. It's like, oh, yep. I guess I'll check it out next time I remember to. And late 2022 was when I finally like really took the dive. And it was just insane, the amount of stuff that I was like, God, I wish I knew about all this before I first was like getting wind of it, because my God, like Opus Eponymous is probably my actual favorite album of theirs.
Mine too.
Yeah. And for a very long time, you know, admittedly for a very long time, Infestissimon was kind of near the lower tier just because I think I, at the time, was not really grasping the conceptual aspect of like different things. And whenever I found out later that there actually was an entirely different mix, like musical audio mix of that album that got shelved in quite a few songs. In fact, the only one that made it out was the initial Secular Haze single, because that one has a different mix than what actually appears on Infestissimum as as we know it now. So I was sitting there like, God, I would love to have heard that mix across the whole thing, but Infestissimum is absolutely up there for me now in terms of songwriting, lyricism, just the production. Like, I actually am a very big fan of the way the European metal scene and rock scene mixes their records, because I think America has too much polish.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because like if you hear like even the band Him, like if you go listen to their stuff, there's always how do I put this? It's like a white noise on the floor. Like it's like a noise floor that lasts throughout it, but there's something ethereal about it that kind of lends to the grain, if you will, of what you're hearing. And I think that's a testament that Tobias has never lost that. Like he's even on Impera, there's still that sound in there.
Still a very almost live sounding, like you can imagine there's a band playing rather than, it all being so flat and, compressed down to the, so compressed and, the drums quantized right to the click and everything. It has human element.
That was never lost upon me in discovering them. So again, that's probably one of my favorite aspects about this band. Now, I remember you telling me we'll get into like the chunk of this here is like you were talking about eventually like starting basically it was kind of like a back catalog of like photography and just kind of relics, if you will, of like some of your time seeing the band, and you've got some stories from all that. So like it's kind of what we're here to shoot the shit about, really.
Yeah. I do a lot of cosplay, like a lot of people, and I have a Facebook group, it's called Ghost Cosplay, and in that group I'm compiling so many photos for reference, of just eras that there aren't too many photos of.
Right.
So not even just from myself, but from other people who are around and have photos that might not have been seen, or behind the scenes photos or things like that are really good references for people who are doing the face paint, or, making a mask, or, repainting a mask from like Trick or Treat Studios or something, or just the costumes. So lots of photos from that. And then also just photos in general from, specifically, there's a lot of photos of like, I think the Prequel era and Impera, but not so much of before that. So I'm just going through and seeing what I have and trying to post a lot of that. I first saw them in Hartford, Connecticut, 2013, on the Hazing Over America tour. So that was like the tour they did right when Secular Haze was released. Actually, I believe it was like still Hazing Over America, and it was like kind of like a continuation of that. Mm. That show was wild because if anyone's ever been there, it's a really small place. It's probably, I don't know, if it's probably just a couple thousand, but it's, with saying that, that's like packed like sardines into this like small hot club, and it was July.
Oh, God.
So it was hot, yeah. You can kind of imagine a couple thousand metalheads packed into this tiny hot club. It was hell. It wasn't, but it somehow lent its way really well to what Ghost was doing then, which I think that like now we're so used to the kind of big theatrical comedic spectacle that I think is like amazing, but then they were really trying to make it kind of spooky and scary. And so that smaller, like packed venue kind of made you really feel like you're at like a cult ritual or something. And, they would, before they came out, they would have guys come out and like ceremoniously uncover the instruments and light the incense, and the whole place would smell so thick with the smoke of incense, and, start the music a half hour before,
See, that's the stuff that I wish I were around for, because one of my episodes, actually the second episode of this podcast that I did, was the Opus Eponymous review, and I remembered seeing the footage of the Live Evil show, which was their second actual like gig. That wasn't their first self-booked, but it was like the second one they ever did that was a little more high profile. And I remembered seeing the footage of that, thinking to myself, God, like you just mentioned, it looks like you're at a cult ritual. Because I was thinking, man, this looks like you stumbled into it mistakenly, and like you're there, but you have the feeling that shit, I'm really not supposed to be here. Like I shouldn't be here. Something evil is afoot.
There's definitely was more of a performance aspect, and also just more of kind of a serious tone to where you had that kind of, I love the like comedic tone and everything. And I think it's great. And I think it's perfect, especially as like a Kiss fan, like that kind of campy type thing.
Yeah.
But there was definitely something to where they use those smaller venues to their advantage, because the smaller kind of, if you're right up on Papa 2 and he's, that intimidating figure, there's something that was just so striking about that. He doesn't talk very much. The ghouls don't talk that much. There's no people aren't like dancing or anything. It feels very much like you're at some type of like a cult and the devil's gonna come, and you're like, part of you too, at that time being, raised religious, was like, should I be here or not? And it just kind of added to that cool factor of the vibe of it. Like from, just the start of Mass Ball to the, their stagehands coming out and lighting the candles and all of that. It added so much performance art or like role playing, and then also there was the aspect like we knew who was under the mask, but we didn't talk about it. So everyone was playing along as a group in this kind of fantasy world, and it made you really be able to step into this fictional world they created. Versus now, I go to a ritual and I see people with shirts with Tobias's face on it or whatever, and it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. Like, oh, well, now I know, what I know now. Or people who next to me calling, their real names out onto the stage, which, if you want to do that, fine. But it takes me out of that kind of, fictional world a little bit, which I love so much.
Yeah. And I've said this before, and I know you feel the same way because we've talked about this. It's like there's no wrong way to really love this band, but I definitely do understand being taken out of it. Like, if it's kind of like professional wrestling in a way. I know this is probably a weird fucking like.
I can see that.
Yeah, it's like it's a weird comparison because like these guys and their ring names, but then like you call them by their real names. It's like, wait, no, no, it just kind of takes you out of it. I get it. That's when I go to a show, I realize who the hell is under these masks and shit, but, just for a couple of hours, let me just think that that's really Papa E up there doing his thing,
Exactly. There's something kind of fun about that because it's just, it's like you're playing along and all the people in this room are as a group playing along. And that's one of the things I miss. But, I don't think that's a fault of anyone. I think that's just like the natural evolution of a band. And, I feel like a lot of ways, if you didn't get to experience that time where it was like that, you're just not used to that. So it sounds kind of wild. It's like, why would we do that? And even then, it was just like part of it. I think that it was so many people did it was because the band kind of wanted to enforce that a little bit more, that, they were, these characters, and that, it was kind of, we knew who was under the mask, but it's more fun to play along,
Yeah, it's like a group cosplay. It's like they're literally handing you the Kool-Aid, man. Drink the shit for a couple hours.
Like for an hour and a half, you can suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, it's pretty much just like we mentioned. It's a live performance art. It's a movie. It's literally going to be a movie, and like a bunch of other cool shit. Yep. So yeah, like the Infestissimum era, kind of going into the Meliora era. It's like there's this weird like. I don't know how else to describe it, dude. It almost feels like Papa 3 got lost in the fucking shuffle somehow. Like I see like there's pictures of him everywhere, but when it comes to like, we've had like Papa 2 has had like, a whole like video done on him with, God damn, I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but they did that, the propaganda.
Was it Noisy?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Like they did the whole propaganda thing. And then Papa 4 / Cardinal Copia has had so much, shit on YouTube. And it feels like Papa 3, he kind of just exists in YouTube form just for the music videos and fan like captured video. And he's had some of the funniest, weirdest stage moments, like the whole, like there's a hole in my shoe thing and, stuff like that. And I loved that character a lot. And it's kind of, I feel like he didn't really get, he didn't get the treatment he deserved as far as that character went. He kind of, the fucker got dragged off stage on his last gig,
That I feel like was very an interesting time because Ghost was changing a lot. And I think that some people were very much like, well, you have to remember that, like, I remember people when Infestissimum came out being like, they've sold out, they're too sexual, they're all these complaints that people have now. Like, people had it then. I remember people being like, this Papa doesn't look as cool as Papa 1 to Papa 2. He's not as like sinister. So these complaints that I see every Papa, I've seen since then. The music is pop music now. They've sold out. They're all like people have said these same things since then, especially as soon as they started to like do bigger tours, and especially as Propaganda came out, because that was like the most comedic and funny. And then I think around that time they shared like fan fiction on their Facebook page that someone had posted, and that set a bunch of people off. Like, oh my God, the women are coming into the fandom, and all these things that you hear from these, kind of older, stuck in their ways guys, and these new fans are ruining everything. It started then.
Imagine that crowd, like when Mariana Cross came out. It's like shit.
Yeah. Right? So I think that, like, when Papa 3 came out, and even if you look at, like, old YouTube videos, you can see the comments of people being like, wow, he talks a lot. Like, it was just such a kind of dramatic shift. But at the same time, if you watch those early Papa 3 shows, he wasn't too different than Papa 2. He just kind of talked a little bit more. He was still that kind of, like, always wore the robe until, like, Unholy Unplugged. But I remember people being like, oh, and people just, like they always do, really didn't like him at first. They were just kind of like, people called him Panda Papa because of that mask that kind of, that sent the wrong one, and that he was, not doing things the right way. So, like, people weren't really accepting of that time. But also it was just like, it was very clear that Ghost was going in a different direction than probably the first two eras. Right off the bat, from the comedic element, the suit, dropping the robes, to that, Papa 3, I think, is important in Ghost because it set the path forward for what Papa 4 and Copia would be, and every Papa before that. What we know now as Ghost, I think, really started during that era.
Yeah, I agree heavily, because it's one of those situations where Papa 3 walked so Cardinal Copia and Papa 4 could run.
Yep.
Because Meliora, I feel like a lot of folks that are just getting into this band, they've listened to Impera first, because obviously it's the most recent release from the band. However, I really feel like Meliora is probably the best entryway, because it seems to be carrying the spirit of, like, the two albums before, but hinting at what they're going to become. And it's a good mix, because there's still some spooky element to Meliora, in terms of like the music.
I think that nowadays in, like, the fandom, I see that, like, an aspect of Papa 3's personality was lost too, and that was that he still was very intimidating and very spooky for at least, like, the first half of the show when he wore his robes anyways. Like, there was certainly still a, like, balance between the kind of comedy, and to me, it hit more because him looking kind of creepy and eerie was like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that funny thing. Because there's that kind of balance between, like, he had such a regal figure. It's like when, like, the president makes a joke and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe the president said that. It's that kind of, like, this regal dark pope making a your mama joke was, like, hit so much more when you wouldn't expect that to come out of him,
right.
Especially because we were used to, Papa 2. So there was this balance, but you look at, like, the press releases, they describe Papa 3 as, like, a tortured, miserable man who hates everyone and everything. So I think, he now gets such a, like, the more comedic, funny, like, Copia type energy was certainly there, but that was more later into the Meliora era. He was much closer to, like, Papa 2 for the majority of it. I think that kind of, like, aspect gets lost in translation looking back at it now. Not to say that he was, as spooky and dark as the other Papas, but that was definitely still a part of it. And even in that album. So that's why I think it was a really good bridge of the old and the new. You had that first half of the show where he didn't talk as much and he wore the robes and all of that. And, he had the thurible. And then the second half where he kind of loosened up and, brought the suit on. And then as we got to the Pope Star era, he got even more to, like, what I think Copia is now, and I know a lot of people around that time started to see that shift and were like, I'm not down with this anymore. So, like, that told me that there was definitely a shift around, like, late 2016 that he started to kind of play with, how can I make this more interesting for the shows rather than just an imposing figure, and make something a little more what I think where he wanted to take the character next. He started to experiment there.
Yeah, because that's around Squarehammer. Like, I think just looking back and doing just research and looking at forums, like old forums, old YouTube comments, it was definitely like as soon as the Squarehammer video dropped, like you mentioned, that I've seen literally comments from all those years ago where they were just like, oh, fuck this, I'm out. Like, you're like, dude, come on. Like, and we know this as musicians, every band changes, every band evolves. Nobody wants to do the same tired ass shit album after album, and especially somebody who is as a creative genius as Tobias is. Like, I can never imagine him pumping the same record out 50 times. That man would get so bored.
I love the Opus Eponymous. I love it. It's my favorite album still. But I wouldn't hate for them to try and just remake it. Because one, I don't think you can. I think that so many things from that time period, it being such a breath of fresh air, just the production, all of that makes that album what it is. I don't think you could remake that album.
No.
But I wouldn't want them to try, because also I think we need to move forward. And I really like people talk about, they've lost edge or something, as criticism. And I'm like, I don't think they have. I think that this is the most, what is more impactful to a satanic band? Like being like, ooh, Satan's going to come and scare you, or, directly calling out the Catholic Church hypocrisy, which I think is what they're doing. So I would argue that the most satanic and edgy, or whatever you want to say, dark, spooky album is Impera and Prequel. So I think that, they've just changed how they're coming at this.
Right. The presentation is a little different, basically.
Yeah. And I happen to love, 80s rock. I love all of that stuff.
Same.
So as soon as Wrath came out, I was like, oh, I really hope they go into this direction more. So I'm loving, the new stuff. But I get some people, it's a big change. So if you don't like it, don't like it. You don't have to complain about it, just stop listening.
Yeah, and Rats is the song that pulled me in. And I was like, holy shit. Because I heard that and then Dance Macabre. Like, those are the two that I really paid attention to. So when I heard Rats, I was like, oh, this is heavy as shit. And then Dance Macabre, I was like, oh my God, it's disco metal ABBA. What the fuck? I love this. That was my response. I loved it. And Prequel was my first album. Like, my first full Sacred Psalm listen from front to back was Prequel. And then I figured out the release order and I went back and did it all in sequence. And I was just like, holy shit, Opus blew me away. I listened to every one of them after that, including Impera. And I was like, holy shit, this Opus is so good. It gave me fucking Merciful Fate vibes, Black Sabbath vibes, all that shit, that real dark, spooky ass shit. And it was just downhill from there, dude. And again, what a time to have probably been alive during the happenings there. I could only imagine the stories that you have from just those time periods, just because I know you've met Papa and Cardinal Copia a couple times, or probably more than a couple, actually. And you've got some stories about some of the ghouls and stuff, too, that we were just kind of bullshitting about.
Yeah, going back to probably the Meliora era is where most of those stories kind of lie. One thing that was kind of interesting about those shows, too, is there's a common misconception, I think, online that no one knew who they looked like without masks, but you can find articles from 2010 telling you exactly who's under those masks. Right. So we knew, but because I would say the majority of people didn't go searching that out who would go to the shows, they were more likely to just come out and hang out in the crowd or hang out at a merch table or something. And the rule was always, you can come get your autographs, come meet them, just no photos. And they'd come out every time after the bus. So I would, regularly hang out by, after the show, and wait for them. And so I've had the opportunity a bunch of times to meet both the, I guess you could say, original lineup and the new lineup. So one time, I guess the story that I was kind of alluding to earlier was they played at a festival here in Connecticut. Long story short, I got to meet them there, and I was wearing a Star Wars shirt. Some of the ghouls were there, and Tobias was there. And we just talked about, this was probably 2015, so we were talking about the new Star Wars coming out, and we were talking about just is it going to be even remotely as good as, the classics? But it was just this kind of weird moment where I was like, I'm talking about Star Wars with this band that I love. Right. And this band at the time, they were just like, wow, people are treating us like we're just normal humans. So we're just happy to have this kind of, low key, they were just drinking a beer and just chilling, Right. And it was really cool probably for them because they got to go out, have these experiences and not necessarily get mobbed by people, because we were just kind of oh yeah, nice to meet you, get a few things signed. But without the photos and all that, I didn't have to worry about all that. So there were certainly a couple of times like that where, I would go to a show and usually it was around the same people who would hang out to wait for them. And, they'd come out and talk, same with their crew, and so I remember talking to them about Star Wars that time. It's funny now looking back at how much Tobias loves Star Wars, and you can see the like influence in like the ghouls for the Impera cycle and stuff. And it's just funny looking back at that and being like, I didn't know they loved Star Wars. You know, I didn't even know if Star Wars was available in Sweden. Like I didn't know. And then so it was just kind of cool to be like, you know, like, oh yeah, episode 1 with the, you know, and all, and talking about all of this kind of nerdy stuff, and then also talking about just like, oh, do you remember those effects, like those practical special effects, and you know, being like, you know, they're all nerds about, you know, that type of stuff too. Like, you know, creature suits and stuff, and talking about obviously wearing the masks and everything, and about, you know, the different workshops that made all that stuff. And, you know, it was just a really fun time.
That's definitely something that shows in both, like we were talking about music production, how Tobias likes to use like practicality for his stuff. It makes it sound live, makes it sound natural, not, you know, any kind of machinery. And it goes into the visual aspect of it too. And you can tell that dude has a very big appreciation for anything that's practically done, be it like visual or creature effects. Hell, just the type of horror movies that he likes. You know, just science fiction and horror really go hand in hand with this band more than people would think, just on surface level.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing they were talking about at that time when we were talking to them is they were like, this show's great now, but we really want to make this a big arena show in the future. Even then, like 2015, 2014, they were like, yeah, we our plans are to make this big show. And they even, I remember talking to, I think, Martin at that time about like basically the setup they have now with the inflatable like type of stained glass type thing, because they had just had like a sheet with, you know, that they put lights behind, and they were like, we want it to be like, you know, screens. So they, like, you know, the plans were in motion there for this thing too. Also, kind of jumping around there, but I one show I went to also was the acoustic show for the Wholly Unplugged. And if you've seen any videos from that, that was the first time they mentioned the possibility of meeting the Papa's father was at that. So it's just kind of interesting that like these little things you can start to see that they were like, oh, this is where we're going to go in the future. And they were really starting to, I think by that point, tease the lore that they were starting to build. It went from just like, you know, it's a spooky pope running a satanic church to like, there's an actual story here that you guys are going to uncover in the coming years.
Yeah, and it seems like that's something that Tobias does as well. Like any type of change that's coming or anything like that, there's subtle breadcrumbs, if you will.
Yeah.
And I know better. Like I know, because I'm kind of the same way anytime I like to do any kind of like slow reveal for any like future project. It's always fun. And that's the fun about it, is to just drop little things here and there just to see who picks up on it, because I think Tobias likes to have his finger on the pulse of like, okay, they're getting it. You know what I mean? I'm not a dumbass. It's like, I know he sees the shit that we all do. He's got to. There's no damn way. I know he doesn't use socials, but like there's some, he has to in some capacity, because like he seems to really grasp what the fans are talking about, because it just seems too coincidental that some of the things that were like, oh, this would be great. Oh, how does that appear like 5 years down the road? You know what I mean? It's great.
I think example is even just like, I know the plan was always for Copia to become Papa, but people really wanting specifically like a Papa again at that towards the end of that cycle. And I remember him starting to like around that time dropping those breadcrumbs of like, he looked cooler with face paint, or, you know, like maybe he can become Papa. And then, you know, he did that interview, I think a year ago. He was like, well, people wanted a Papa, so like, here we go, you know?
Right.
And so I think that like, he definitely, you know, pays attention to that type of stuff.
You got to. It's kind of like a supply and demand, you know, kind of thing there.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, they're not afraid to do things that are new and different, but also not stray too far to where it's something that doesn't feel like them,
and
you know?
Thanks Satan for that. I mean, fuck.
Yeah. That's the thing that I've, you know, kept me coming back over and over again, is that consistency of at least I always want new things. This might upset some people. I don't want one of the past Papas to come back.
Same.
I don't want that. I don't want Copia to become the Antichrist. I want new things.
Me too.
I want a brand new character, a brand new story. I want all the new stuff. I love that Mariana Cross got really big, but I felt like Impera took a backseat for a while to the promotion of that. and I would have loved to have seen, rather than maybe the Mariana Cross video, another Impera video or something like that. So I'm just someone who always wants that, to really immerse myself in that new cycle that's happening currently. And part of it is I've been here since 2012. I've seen Papa 2, Papa 3. I've seen them. I don't need to see them again.
Right.
You know, like I don't need to relive this. I saw the 7 Nations of Satanic Panic cycle for Impera when they were doing, you know, the LA event. As cool as it all was, I already saw that. I would have rather have seen that back then than now. I would have rather seen like a, you know, something new, you know. So
I feel like that's coming though, dude. Really. Like,
oh yeah.
Cause I'm on the same page as you. In fact, I just did a Q&A episode recently, and somebody did ask like, hey, what do you want to see? Like, you know, coming up. And I was like, I want a new Papa. Like, I really do. Or a new figurehead even. Like, it doesn't have to be a Papa. Yeah. It could be a completely new figurehead, but I want something that's not what we have now or what we've had then, because again, going all the way back to people that are in music don't like to repeat themselves. And I feel like people that do, it gets stale.
It does. And I feel like, you know, I would love to see, you know, like a new Papa figure that has a real new energy and a new story. And I would love to see, I love that part of Ghost, the regenerating, you know, this new cycle, the beginning of a new cycle, and getting a new Papa and getting new things and learning to love this character, you know.
It's exciting, man.
It's so exciting. And I know that a lot of people are really, really attached to Cardinal Copia and are, you know, really dreading this change.
Oh, and I get that too. I really do.
I get that too, because we've had him for so long. Mm-hmm. But I feel like at the same time, you have to kind of, you know, be like, all right, that's going to suck, but like, it's going to be so good. It's going to be overwhelmed by the good of this new, you know. So I'm really excited for people who are newer fans to experience that for the first time.
Yep.
And really get to see, like, it's not as bad as you think.
No.
Like, it's not. I've seen people on TikTok say that, like, you know, when Copia goes, I'm leaving the fandom. And I'm just like, no, you got to see what comes next. It's going to be so good. Like, they've always gotten better and better. You're going to love this new character. And it's still him, you know, like, it's not going to be too different, you know?
Right. And like, I know that guy is not going to like, he will and he won't. Like, he's not going to do that character dirty, like, whenever it does eventually go. He's not. Because, like, I know that Tobias knows how beloved that specific character is. And I think a lot of people are going to become just as attached to the new person, whoever it's going to be. And like you said, it's exciting. It's a ride, and it's really a roller coaster. Like, you pay to get on a roller coaster for the fucking thrill. This is like one of the coolest roller coasters that you could ever be on, is the roller coaster of Ghost. Roller coaster, even.
Yeah. I mean, like, just talking about like my experiences, like going back to the beginning of the Prequel cycle, right?
Right.
I think that one thing that people kind of either forget or they weren't there to experience, was just the amount of absolute hatred for Copia when he came out.
Tobias even hated him.
Yeah, it was intense. Like, and it's funny to look now that he's like the most beloved character, but at that time, like, you can look at the comment section still, I think, and see just the amount of people. And I, like, being in the fandom at that time, I had friends who were just like, all right, that's it for me. I'm checking out. That's enough of Ghost. And they haven't been back in the fandom since. It was really such a drastic change. The thing that got most people was the lack of the face paint. And people were really trying to trick themselves into thinking that Copia meant error, and that he was going to get replaced by the real Papa before the album came out. You know, people were going into real in-depth conspiracy theories to try and justify why Copia wouldn't be the frontman, because he just couldn't be. He looked too dumb. He looked too goofy. He looked too silly. It was not Ghost-like. And I remember seeing that, you know, the morning that dropped, seeing the profile picture and being like, I remember rushing into the other room, the house I lived in at the time, and being like, look at this, like, he's perfect. And I've been getting online, and I remember being so dejected by just the amount of, like, utter hatred. Don't worry, guys, you know, Copia means error. You know, he's not actually, you know, they're going to kill him before the real Papa comes. And I just think the point of that is that, like, it's going to happen again, probably. People are going to be so resistant to change, but now look at us. Like, I don't think anyone would imagine hating Copia. You know, he is the most beloved character that there is. But I remember people being so mad, to the point where I made a Facebook group at the time called Cardinal Copia Fans, just to try and, like, combat some of that negativity. And I remember when I met Cardinal for the first time, I showed him on my phone the group, and he was just like, he seemed really like touched by that like it was just like, like people weren't happy about him being, Cardinal. Like you said, even the band seemed to not like him, and it just seemed like so much, that was such a big drastic change. And then remembering that, we also just had the lawsuit, so people were kind of already, unsure of, what was like, why are people suing him? Why are, so just all of these big changes was kind of, I think, too much for some people.
Do you think, I just thought about something that I don't think I've ever theorized before about the character of Cardinal Copia without the face paint and stuff. Do you think that might have been, because like we mentioned, this is like that whole era though is like happening during, like before, during, and after, like the recording and all that stuff. Do you think that Cardinal Copia was a way to humanize the character a bit? I don't know how else to put it. It's like, you put the papas in the paint and shit, and there's the like theatricality of it all, and same with Copia, but do you think like him kind of presenting as like a human, like with a regular like non-painted face and all this other shit, do you think that was kind of like maybe a conscious effort to humanize him a bit, since the lawsuit was kind of a thing?
Yes, and I also think that just honestly, Prequel as a whole is so dictated by the lawsuit that honestly at times for me, it's why it's not my favorite album, is that I just feel like too much, it brings back those memories to the point where like when I hear a song like Faith or even Rats to some extent, I'm just like, oh, I want escapism and I don't want to think about that. But I think that deliberately introducing the idea of killing off the papas was definitely a direct result of that. Because there was that whole thing of, Tobias didn't create Papa and all that, and that was brought up in the lawsuit and all of these things. And so to me, I was like, very much, I think it was all very deliberate to burn everything down and start new, but also to show that, like, we're not just continuing on what people perceive to be what the band created, and that, they could do something new and fresh. But like you said, to humanize the character, and I think it was also kind of taking it down a notch from this, kind of gaudy character to something that is a little more human, is a little more, people had to love this new character. People had to love this new character because, it's so new. It's so different from what we were used to. And it felt like really that, like going to the lawsuit a little bit and all of that, it just like, it felt like your parents were getting divorced. It was just a really rough thing fandom wise because people were split. Some people were on Team Ghoul. Some people were on, Team Papa. Everyone was split. There was a lot of division in the fandom. There was arguing. There was, also the magic of that kind of, identity loss was lost. And it was like, your parents telling you Santa's not real. It was this really tumultuous time. And then also you have to think that, like, as a fan, we had grown so attached to that lineup of ghouls and we got no explanation. It's like, I think when people talk about, like, when Chris left the band or was, let go, and we had a new ghoul and there was no introduction, just imagine that, but with every member on the stage replaced. Yep. And we didn't really know that was going to happen. So they just came on stage with all new members. And, at that point, obviously it sounded kind of rough because they had not been playing together for a long time. And it was just like, felt like they were passing us off as the same ghost. And it was like, it's not. So there was just such a, like, even for me, that was a moment where I was like, I don't know if I'm down with this. It was just so much change. Those couple of years were really rough. And I know that, they've talked about how rough it was for them too. But fandom wise, we were just kind of lost feeling. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if what, Tobias was saying was right or if the ghouls were right. We didn't know if we've been supporting someone who was, taking money from people or doing it. So it was very, blurry of what was happening, especially if you didn't follow everything really directly. And it seemed like we were facing the possible end of Ghost at their height of their success, because there was the possibility that this lawsuit could have went bad and, we could have lost Ghost and that could have been it. And for some people it was because, here's this band that we've been hanging out with at shows and, loving. And now there's all these new people on there and it's kind of disjointed kind of, thing that is just being, it just felt, it was like step parents coming in. And once, it found its footing and everything worked out, obviously. But at the time, that happening and then wondering, like, okay, without Martin Prisoner, without, the rest of them, is this album going to be good? What's it going to sound like? Like, can one person do, like, we didn't know because there was such little information out there. And so, so I think killing off the Papas and everything was really just a reinvention. And I really honestly do treat it like two bands that kind of changed at that point, and I like both of them. But, there is such a difference in it, and I think it's changed for the better personally. But, that time was so not traumatic, but, just very like a rough time to be a fan. So with such drastic changes, I think that like it was important to him that Copia was loved eventually, and that we grew to love him, and that underdog kind of story was important because I think he felt like the underdog. And so that kind of, secession to when he finally comes Papa hits so much more than just being introduced to here's Papa 4.
Right. I feel like that's why that character has stuck around as long as it has, honestly, because it's one of the, it's an underdog to a champion story, really. And it's like, okay, I've seen this guy through. It's time to let him go. You know what I mean? Because people out there that love this band will probably feel the same way. And I know you probably feel the same way. The final gig named Death show in Mexico, when he ascends to Papa 4 status, is like such an emotional high point to watch. It's so fucking cool to hear ABBA's Arrival being played while the Sisters of Sin are out there, like putting him together, putting his Papa robes on. And when I tell you, I think that bar none, every crowd outside of the continental United States, like Mexico, Sweden, Finland, United Kingdom, anywhere in Europe, really, they have our crowd's asses handed to us like on a daily basis, bro, because the roar from the crowd in Mexico when he got revealed and then Conclave Con Dio started, that is one of the loudest fucking roars I have heard in my life. Just coming from the fan, like phone cam, you can hear it. Like there's no faking that. That is like a gargantuan fuck yes, from like thousands of people jam-packed in this fucking arena, dude. And that had to have been such a high point for the man underneath that mask, really, if you think about it. That had to be such a high point for him. I don't know how it could not be, to feel like, okay, we're back in fucking business. Even though they were at that point, that kind of feels like the exclamation point of like, okay, we're about to get this motherfucker really rolling.
Definitely for me, like at that time too, I wasn't at the show, but I was watching the live stream, and, I was decked all out in my Ghost gear, and I had the albums going all day, and I was like, we knew there was going to be a new Papa that day pretty much. So, I was like, talking all day in fandom spaces, I was running groups at the time too. And I was like, what do we think it's going to be? You think it's going to be Copia? You think Copia's going to, cause there was all types of weird rumors that, Copia would kill Nil and take his soul, or, Copia would get killed and then, the new Papa would come out and all these things. And so we didn't know what would happen. So there was that degree of, I hope it's Copia, but what if it's not? Who could it be? What's it going to look like? Is he, could someone old come back? What could it be? The one theory I see a lot, and it's interesting how Sith theories come back because I've seen this again, is that like Nil was going to take Copia's strength and become young again, and then young Nil would be the front man for it. But to see that, that night, I remember so quickly, I was watching that live stream and it cut out just as the nuns surrounded Copia and then came back and he was Papa. And everyone was just like, what? Like, what just happened? Like, oh my God. And just that moment of, I thought, my first thought was that Copia died because it just looked like they were surrounding a body, from like the bad camera angles, and I didn't know what was going on, and I thought that Arrival was like funeral music, and I was just like, no, and then,
dude's getting fucking prison shanked on stage right there.
Yeah, I was just like, all right, now what, because and then I, the next, a couple hours later saw everything, and I just, the collective excitement of, and that's something I'm really excited for all new fans to experience soon, is just the collective excitement of everyone online losing their shit. Oh my God, he's in blue. Oh, it's Copia. Oh, we have a Papa again. Oh, Ghost feels, and then coming right off with like Conclave, and like it just felt so much like Ghost is back. This is like the natural progression of after Meliora. If this had happened like right after Meliora, I don't think it would have the same impact, but I think it would have like fit so well. Just the vibe, everything. It was just like, it's like, this is the most Ghost that Ghost has felt in a while. And I was like, yeah, okay, we're back. We're going to be okay. It was very much a we're going to be okay after this, kind of, not to say that Brickell was bad or anything, but, it was so controversial that it was like, all right, we're just like, even people who I knew who had been out of the fandom throughout like the Copia era were like, all right, that's pretty cool. I think I might check out the new album. And it was just like, yeah, we're back.
Hell yeah, dude. How was it meeting? Okay, so first of all, how many of the Papas have you met, or have you just met Copia? As far as like in the character,
Papa 3, I met. I did. I don't know where that photo went. It's got to be on some device somewhere. But I did that for the Pope Star tour. So I did that was first meet and greet. Copia as Cardinal twice, and then as Papa 4 twice.
Hell yeah, dude. How were those experiences? Like as far as just. Were there any differences between the times as far as like how he was, his demeanor? Like, because obviously he stays in character whenever you meet him as Papa.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a big thing. And so I always try to play along very much, and anything I say, I'm saying to the character, obviously. But I try to ask questions in the world and things like that. So when I met Papa 3, that was a very kind of rushed meeting, and I was very nervous. And so I don't have a great memory of exactly how it went, but it was very much just like small talk, take a photo, leave. Copia was different. The first time I met him was in 2018 at Boston at the Wing Theater. And that was during the Pale Tour named Death. So that was that like 3-hour set with the full, which by the way was like probably the best ritual I've been to. Was just that like hearing, I think they played Idolatry for the first time that night, and all these, like it was just an amazing set in an old historic theater, and it was great. But I met him that night, and I remember it being like, congratulations on becoming the frontman, because it was so new.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the album or whatever. And he was like, oh, thank you so much, and shook my hand, gave me a hug, and then we took our photo, and he was like, enjoy the show, it's gonna rock. And I was like, thank you. And it was just like that nice little brief meeting, but he was so that awkward kind of Cardinal Copia.
I love that shit. It's it's giving that, because I shared this on the gonstFM TikTok where he's giving the little backstage tour with some of his people, and he's just like, the story about Jesus, right? How he rode in on an ass, your mother's ass, and then he just kind of awkward like, cool, all right. Like the joke didn't even fucking land.
that is very much accurate. One thing that I think you got to understand about these meet and greets is they advertise them as photo ops for a reason. They're short. They'll last like on average 30 to 40 seconds. So they're really short. Come in, and there's a photographer there kind of rushing you.
Right.
Come in, stand on the X, take your photo, maybe exchange a word, and then you're out, because they got to go through so many people.
Sure.
So it's not like you can have a full conversation. Sometimes you're lucky and you can on slow nights. But, it's a really quick thing. And I think a lot of people come out disappointed because they're expecting, more based on how it's described. But it's definitely a photo op. So, but one thing that is interesting is by the third time I met him, he started to recognize me, which was just like cool, but like recognizing me in character. And that was really cool because it was like, I came in that one time, I think the third time, and he was like, oh, it's good to see you again. It's been a while, And I told the story about the time I went and broke my leg. I was just kind of retell that a little bit, but I went, I broke my leg just before the show, and I wasn't going to go to the show, but I ended up going anyways. And I, got there at 11, waited. I had big crutches, if you ever seen it with crutches, or had crutches, it's so cumbersome.
Yeah.
And being in a line, a GAQ for all this time, it was a nightmare, logistically. But I went in and I did I started to do the VIP, and I talked to Billy Vanilla first, who I wish was still touring with them. He's great. If anyone doesn't know, he was a big part of their crew. And he did, you can see him in some of the documentaries and stuff. But anyways, he was telling me that I had broken my knee and he had broken his knee like not long before. Sure. And he was telling me that his doctor told him like not to go on the Metallica tour. And he went on it anyways. And he was just like, I shouldn't have went because Metallica wasn't great. He was like, he was like, what they were talking about. He was talking about, like I had the brace just like yours when we were going. So it kind of made me feel more comfortable going in. And then, since I had done VIP just before, all of the VIP crew was like what did you do to your leg? You were here like a couple weeks ago and you were fine. And I was like, I was like, no.
Well, what had happened was,
yeah, I explained the story, and they were so accommodating, which is the thing I think that was like really helpful. Was they were like, all right, we'll get you a chair. You could sit. And they were like, we didn't know where to sit you, so they sat me in the veneration of relics next to Papa 3's coffin, and it was just so funny because thick smell of incense in this room. I'm just sitting there like twiddling my thumb, do 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 do, and there's these corpses, next to me. These like, and it's just like and then the other weird thing about that is in that room at that time was also the VIP area. So I was just sitting here twiddling my thumbs with some people and knowing that like Papa or Cardinal at the time, I think, was just behind the curtain, like just doing his thing. And I just was like, this is the most surreal, weird thing ever. And I'm like, kind of glad I broke my leg that I got to like do this. And then I went in and Copia was the same way. He was like, what? We just saw you. What happened to your leg?
Your leg broken. Like, why?
Yeah. But he made a joke about like, maybe the music will break your other one. It'll be so loud and you'll have to like crawl out of here or something. And he was like, but we're going to make it look like in the photo, like you're fine. So he took my crutches and then hid them behind the curtain and then like held me up and like posed for the photo. And we took a photo and then he got my crutches back. And it was like, he wanted to make it look like my photo wasn't, I wasn't broken. And so.
What a sweetheart of a man, honestly, dude. Like, and
yeah.
like that, because that is both like Copia and Tobias. Like that man has got one of the purest hearts I've ever seen, like in rock music. And the fact that even out of this whole facade and everything, he's very much down to earth and just likes to live normally. And like, that just speaks to the kind of person he is. He's like, dude, like we're going to make it look good. And what a fucking gentleman, dude. Like seriously, like what a fucking guy. That's amazing. That's probably one of my favorite stories I've ever heard about him.
Yeah. Throughout the show, it was the same way. Like, they had security help me up to the front, right up the barricade, got up there with my crutches, put my crutches behind the security barricade so I didn't have to have them in the way. And then, even the band made sure that, throughout the night that they were, interacting with me because I was right up front at the barricade, and really made it just a really special night. And I was almost not going to go. And I was just really glad. And then also the fans, because, this fandom is amazing. And they were just so, all of them. I met people who I consider my like lifelong friends that night who just helped me, made sure I got everywhere safely, made sure I was okay, and as future rituals went on, I was always so glad to see them. And, they become like close friends. And everyone there was just like, oh no, don't worry. Like I'll give up my spot up front to make sure you can like have something to rest on. It was like such a moment that also there was kind of that uncertainty of like, are the shows still going to hit the same in arenas? Because it was like the first arena tour and like, all of these things. And so it just made me be like, okay, I'm more comfortable with smaller places than arenas just because of like anxiety. So all of that just made me feel so much more like, okay, Ghost is in a good place, the fandom's in a good place, and things are good. So that night was just really special because I think those initial arena shows still had a little more of that small venue feel with it, even with the band. It was less corporate, professional.
Right.
It was a little more like, we can't believe we're here, and we know you can't believe that we're here either. So let's just celebrate this band being this big now.
Right. It was just a kind of a dipping our, like literally band, fans, crew, all of it, just dipping their toes in the water and be like, let's just see what the fuck happens and let's see where this goes. You're on the ride. We're on this ride together.
And going back to meeting Copia, like, I met him 2 other times as Papa. And that time, like, he wasn't very different, but he remembered me. And I was like, congrats for, being Papa. Like, big congratulations. And I gave him a little art piece I made, and he took it. And it was just, it's always such a great thing to do. But I remember being so kind of like struck in that, like, I can't believe that you remembered me, after all of this time. He's great. Yeah. If you have a chance and you have the money to spare for the meet and greet and they do it again, I think everyone should do it. I think it's just a great thing to do. And also just from the stink of like hanging out with your fellow fans, that's the thing where it's at, man.
Yeah, my first ritual was last September in the Woodlands in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. And It was some of the most fun I've ever had at a concert in my life. Just seeing all walks of life, all ages. Dude,
Yep.
there was a whole, and I really mean this with my full ass, this guy had to have been in his fucking late 70s, maybe early 80s. He was in a full suit, makeup and miter as Papa Nil, and he was not a young guy with old man makeup. Like, this dude was old. You could tell he put the paint on his face itself, and I was just like, this is so fucking cool. I've never met a more diverse fandom in my life, man.
There was a little girl in front of me at the last ritual that I went to, the Bridgeport, Connecticut ritual. And she was dancing the whole night. She was probably 8, dancing the whole night, knew the words to most of the songs. And she was like, apologized to her dad that she didn't know the words to some of the songs. And it was so cute. And she was just like, I think that's Copia. And she didn't, was so very clearly still learning, but it was so nice that people were educating her, like, this song is off Opus Eponymous and this is this. And it was such a nice, like, thing to experience that, like, I was injured again for that and was in a wheelchair. And so it was really special because I was like, I'm almost living through this little girl. And I was like, I remember my first ritual and I remember that feeling. And going back to that, I got to go to that show with my wife, who I met through Ghost. So that show was just like super special.
I love that. I loved hearing that about you guys too. Just in our interactions on social media, that was, it's one of the most wholesome fucking things too. Like, just the way that this band and its fandom brings people together, let alone, like, you met your wife there, through this band. Like, that's so fucking cool. I love hearing about shit like that all the time.
That's a wild story because what happened was, once I got kind of wind that Mariana Cross was going viral, I felt like there was 2 reactions I saw. There was like, oh, this is good. And then there was, oh, this is terrible. These new fans are going to ruin everything. They're children. This is bad. TikTok is bad. TikTok evil. And I was like, all right, I got to go on to TikTok and make some type of account to, 1, help new fans and educate them and kind of welcome them, but 2, to kind of be like, don't worry. Like, no, like, just because we're an older fan does not mean that we're going to, like, hate crime you or something, like, it was like, so that was kind of my goal, was that I went on there to welcome and help, and kind of bridge a gap there. So I made this account, News from the Clergy, to kind of like, my original goal was to update on like all new Ghost stuff and kind of have like a kind of a podcast type thing, or like weekly updates. Didn't really pan out that way, but I would do live streams and a lot of people were coming. I'd have like 300, 400 people in these streams, all of fans who were new to Ghost and were like asking all these questions, and it was amazing. And one of those people was my wife, my now wife. And we, started talking, and then, my wife, interestingly enough, had lived across the country at that time, in Nevada, and I live here in Connecticut. So, that's a far distance. And so, we talked online and we were calling, 12 hours, long FaceTime calls and everything. And then, started visiting, and then long distance. And then, we got married in September. Our first dance was Darkness at the Heart of My Love. And then we got to go to, not long after that, we got to go to the show. And it was just something about being like at the show with the person I met through this band, experiencing this. And my wife was, one of those found Ghost through TikTok. So it was this nice bridge of like the newer fans, old fans, and we were together. And, I just felt like I could learn about, what people on TikTok are thinking. And I could, it was this like nice thing. And it was a full circle moment of like, really like, okay, now we're at the show together, listening to the song that was our first dance, and everything. And, it was great. So I'm like really excited to like future, experience shows. Now it gave me like a new life and a new love of Ghost. It was just like, okay, now I have this deep emotional connection that even more than I had before. And so now I can, go to this show, and I can't wait to do, hopefully meet and greet again and get a photo, and like hold up our wedding photos or something, or our rings, with Papa. It's so exciting.
That's fucking great, dude. I love that shit. Oh God, that choked me up a little. That's fucking good, man. I love that so much. And getting to experience an album cycle together, brand new. That's even sweeter.
It was really awesome because Phantom Mind came out on my wife's birthday last year.
Righteous.
Yeah. So it was like perfect timing. And getting to experience that was amazing. And now I'm like, we can experience the new Papa. And we were like, let's go see the movie together. We'll go, we're saving, we have a ghost fund for the tour when it comes and everything. And we're just, it's like, I got like really depressed during the pandemic. And one of the things getting me through was ghosts. So I was very much like, literally like, that meme of the guy with the board with the conspiracy theories. Like that was me being like, so the date between Infrasystemum and Meliora was this amount of weeks, and like trying to figure out, because I was just holding on to Ghost coming back. That I was going like, honestly looking back, unhealthily in depth, trying to figure out when, Impera was going to drop. And now I'm like, I'm not alone this time. I get to like, bounce my theories off of you and, figure these things out. And it's great. So that, and it goes back to the thing is like, this band brings people together in a way that I don't think a lot of bands do. So I'm excited to experience this new, fandom. Like even your group, right? Your Facebook group, like those are people who are going to be bonded for life. We create these communities, and I think that it's so important, and it's something that separates Ghost. And if you're not like a Ghost fan, you'll never understand it,
Right. And really, that was the aim of like gonstFM. Really, that's the aim of gonstFM and gonstFM really is to just like connect everybody more. Because my very favorite part of doing literally all of this stuff is when we get to a station head ritual where we, hang out in the chat. And I have like a curated ritual set list to play music, and we all just vibe and we all connect and we all just be there together. Because for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people that are in there, that's as close as a lot of us would probably get to attending an entire actual ritual together as one community, which would be the ultimate fucking dream, actually. So
yeah, and it feels like when you talk about Ghost, right? It takes the best elements of like going to church, right? This togetherness and this, unity and this community. I mean, if you can criticize the church for a lot of things, but I mean, they're great at building community. And I think that Ghost does that in our own way. And it really does feel like, to some people and to me, like it is like religion, Papa is my Pope,
right.
It is that feeling. I think that's why that gimmick they have is even more genius, because that togetherness of us all joining in this one building, or internet space, all with this shared love, but putting in something more positive rather than, the negative feeling. There's no, you're going to go to hell if you don't agree with this or whatever, there's no, it's like takes the best part of going to church and religion and makes it this special thing that I think no other fandom has.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've just fallen in love with this group and everything that they've done. And I can see why everybody else has too.
They're also just like, speaking of, like I've talked about how I've been really lucky to, sometimes talk to the members of the band and things, and I've met them and things, and they're just good people, and I can confirm that, they're all just really good people. And, even like, in 2018, I messaged Soto and I told him, you inspired me to really pick up my guitar playing and get better at it, because I was playing mainly drums then. And he was like so appreciative in that message before he deleted his Instagram. And I was like, no, I didn't take a screenshot, but he was just so appreciative. He was like, wow, so I inspired someone, like that means a lot, and that type of thing. Just in general, like I've told the story a couple of times, or I mentioned I was going to tell the story about, I reached out to the old Earth Ghoul about playing on my album that I was recording at the time. And I was expecting him to be like, absolutely not. And I told him, like, I was like, it's like a Blink-182 like pop punk thing. And he emailed back and he said, oh, I love Blink-182. Absolutely. This is my rates. I have a studio here in Sweden. Send me the tracks.
I just want to go on record right fucking now. Hearing that, I just want to go on record right fucking now that everybody that ever told me I was a dipshit for liking both Ghost and Blink-182 can officially suck my dick now.
Yeah, man. I'm seeing them fly. I'm pumped. Like, yeah. I mean, I have a really wide variety. Like, I came from playing in blues bands originally. So I have like this really wide span of music that I love. I love everything from like blues, jazz, pop punk, emo,
Same.
to, like the heaviest of metal.
Me too. I've played drums for 30 years, dude. I've played guitar, bass, keyboard for about 20 each, and like I was in choir. I was a show choir geek. Like I'm a musician through and through. That like music period just drives me. So I get it. I really do.
And that's part of the thing I love about Ghost is that they dance with so many different genres. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There's a little bit of all these different things, and I love it all. So it's really like if they decide to make a really poppy album, I like pop music. I'm okay with that.
Same.
If they decide to make a really heavy album, I'm okay with that. I like really heavy albums. If they want to make like 60s type of things, some of my favorite bands are like the Beatles and the Turtles and all of those 60s kind of bands like that. I love that too. So like I'm so down for whatever they want to do.
Me
Which
too.
I think that sometimes people get really stuck up on, especially when we were talking about it. Like people like it has to be the like spooky Black Sabbath metal all the time, and it's like, no, man. Like I want to hear them make what could Blink do? Or, like could they do like a Blink style song? Like that'd be cool,
right?
Like what could they do? Like that make that evil? As long as Ghost has like dark lyrics with a happy sounding song, I think it sounds like Ghost.
Boy, it's gonna be interesting to see where they go from here. And
yeah.
Dude, I'm excited. I cannot like express my excitement enough just to finally be at a spot during my run as a newer to the band fan, to have my first transition to something else. Like I'm fucking so stoked for it.
I'm excited to see everyone's reactions. I mean, obviously I'm excited about myself, but I'm excited to just see like, I've had debates and I've been like, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, I don't know. Because it's a small subset, but there are definitely people who don't want a change. And so I'm like, I don't know how that's going to go over, but I'm excited to see how many people can we win over who are hesitant about this.
Correct. That's another thing about going back to like the Facebook group that we're both in, or groups, I should say. Because I'm also in Ghost cosplay. Like they have the station channels in there and stuff too. And I see a lot of it, and it's fucking fantastic, by the way. I forgot to mention that earlier. I wanted to tell you I fucking love that group so much. That's another thing about these groups is being there to kind of like soften the landing for some of these people who are really going to be, and we're not even like kidding when Anthony and I fucking say this, there are people out there that are going to be literally emotionally devastated at the change that is going to happen.
It's going to happen. There's going to be people who are really hurting. There's going to be people, and I've seen it already. So like, I know some people are like, oh, that won't happen. There's going to be people who are ready to leave this fandom. There are people who already now I've seen are like in the middle of the mid cycle. They're like, I'm done. That's it. I only like this version of the band. I'm not going to like the new frontman. I don't want a new Papa. I don't want a new frontman. I don't want a new album. I don't want this. I want it to say this. I like how it is now, and I don't want it to change. And I totally get that. But like, I'm here to say now, like it's gonna be okay. Like it's gonna be okay. It's not gonna be that drastic of a change. Like like even though the characters changed, like it's not like we're gonna be completely losing it. And also the thing that I don't get is like, yes, characters die. It happens, but that's a newer thing with Ghost. Like there's no reason that Copia has to be brutally murdered. My wife and I always joke that it would be really funny if he just got like arrested for tax fraud, and then with like a character that like appeared throughout in like something, it was just like something really dumb, rather than being killed. Like,
right.
I think it would.
And even funnier, like if that was like what happened is if like he did it by mistake, like he had no idea that what he was doing was wrong, and he's just so naive, or he's just so like
he was like, I thought the church was tax exempt, like I think there's other routes you can go to, like I don't think that he needs to be, but obviously like prepare, he probably will be killed off. It's what they seem to be doing now, but like it doesn't, like people get so hung up on this, and it's like yes, we're losing one character, but I mean we even know when Nil died, he's not gone, he's still around. So like it doesn't mean that we're never going to see this character again. It's like it's going to be a good new thing at the same time.
Yes.
I don't think they're fully going to get rid of him. I don't think they can. I think that he's going to, in some think even the wise thing to do would be, have him retire and then have him be some type of like offshoot mentor character. I don't know. But I think that like, even if he does meet a grisly end, it'll be at the hand of, we get a new character who is probably even funnier and even livelier and even, more lovable,
Dare I say his death might be humorous, actually. Like, knowing the comedic element that they've been kind of employing, I guarantee you that it's probably, if he does bite the dust, it's going to be funny.
Yeah. And I would be so down with that, and I would, each Papa seems to get younger. Like, I don't think we're going to go back to some weird, dark, spooky old Pope. I think we're going to get a even more funny, even more gonst, frontman.
Yes.
That I think is exactly what we want. I think that like, I don't think it's going to take long for people to get won over by a new frontman. And we'll be, who knows, 4 years, 5 years from now, we'll be sitting here again saying, oh, they better not take away Papa 5 or whatever who it is,
Back in my day, we had Papa Emeritus the Fourth, and we had to walk 15 miles in tennis rackets in the snow, just shit like that.
I feel that way sometimes where I'm just like, oh, well, I remember when Papa 3 was taken off stage. And I remember, when Papa 2 retired, it's like, it's that type of thing. It's like, I do feel that way constantly because, I've talked about like, there are so many things that are different in the fandom. And I don't say that in a negative way. It's just a very different fandom. And sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I remember, and it's like, I gotta like stop myself from being like,
old man yells from porch.
Yeah. Like, I remember when Papa was scary.
You don't know what scary is.
I remember when Ghost was dark.
It reminds me of Dr. Loomis from Halloween. Yeah. You don't know what evil is.
Exactly. But at the same time, I catch myself and I'm like, it's not cool.
Yeah.
It's not cool. Like there's people out there who are genuinely like that, and it's just like, will crap on everything that is new. And I'm just like, I said it earlier. I want the new things. I want all the new things. Give me the new things. Give me everything brand new. Give me something we've never seen before, but that's still Ghost,
Right. Same. Is there anything else that you were wanting to plug?
Yeah. Ghost Cosplay. It's a Facebook group. In there, I'm building there'll be folders of, and we'll probably have a Google Drive too, of 400 photos of just Papa's mask or just his robes or just everything. I'm trying to compile, and I'm working with people to get a really good reference library to where you can go in and look at photos from any era. And, when you're working on your costumes, get good close-up, high-quality images that maybe you wouldn't find anywhere else. There's a lot of people in there who have been in this cosplay community. Like myself, I've been doing Ghost cosplay since 2014. There's people in there who, are really involved in the cosplay community and have access to things that are really fantastic. So I really think that it's a great place if you want to get started. On some other groups, they like you have to have a cosplay before you join. We're welcoming anyone who wants to get into it. Even if you just have you painted your face once. We'll give you recommendations on the best face paint, where to get, there's going to be a link to that will have all the here's where you get Papa 1 robe. Here's where you get a Papa 1 mask. Who's the best person to paint this? Who's the best person to do this? And, we'll have special great resources, and we do Maker Monday where you can share what you're working on. It's a really great community for people who are getting into cosplay.
That's fucking amazing, dude. And I've noticed that just, when the cosplay group first popped up, I remember wanting to join immediately and try to get people traction there. So if you want to check out Ghost Cosplay on Facebook, you can simply scroll up to the show notes below. There will be a link. You can click that link and you can join because Anthony fucking just said so. So go do it.
And one other thing I just want to plug real quick is my TikTok account. I'm in summer 2022, I was doing a lot of live streams in full Ghoul cosplay. And just talking about Ghosts with people, and it was really fun. I'm going to be doing that again this summer with full production. I have a backdrop and everything. A lot of people were making video. Someone made a video that was like, I'm still nostalgic for summer 2022 when Uncle Ghoul would do his live streams and stuff. And so I'm going to start doing that again. And there'll be set times that I do it, like every other Friday or something like that. And it'll be really fun. I'm going to do a lot of giveaways. I'm trying to downsize some of my ghost collection. So I'll be giving away signed Papa photos and stuff like that. So it'll be really fun. And I want to kind of bring back the vibe of when people were just getting into ghosts for the first time. We'll listen to the albums, maybe I'll grab a guitar and play through the albums. It'll be really fun. And people have been asking me for that for a long time. So I think this is a good time to announce that I'm going to be bringing those live streams back like I used to.
Shit, yeah, I'll definitely pop into some of those too.
Yeah. So my TikTok there is at News from the Clergy, or you can search Uncle Ghoul and it should pop up.
That'll be in the show notes below too.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'll link all that stuff down there, dude. Anthony, my friend, I really, really appreciate you hanging out with me. This has been a ton of fun, dude. Yeah. I know we could probably sit here and just chat for hours on end about this. I definitely would love to have you back on sometime in the future.
For sure. Anytime, I'm always down.
Anthony, I'll catch you down the road, my friend. Once again, if you'd like to join the Ghost Cosplay Facebook group or follow Anthony on TikTok, the links can be found in the show notes below. For past, present, and future episodes of gonstFM Off Air, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. You can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a rating on Spotify, and leave comments on individual episodes. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and if you like what you hear, leave a comment below. If you would like to join us on Stationhead for a gonstFM radio ritual, if you'd like to buy gonstFM merchandise, if you would like to join the official gonstFM Facebook group, gonstFam, links to all of these things can be found in the show notes below. And so, my dearest gonslings, today's episode comes to a close. Some of you I will see in Internet Land. The rest of you, I will see in gonstFam. Take care of yourselves. And remember, until next time, in Gonst, we Tronst. I'm Richie. I'll see you next time.